Hello and welcome. Today let's talk about the digestive system. Now when we talk about the digestive system, you'll see the digestive system is going to be important in the maintenance of homeostasis. It's going to help maintain homeostasis by ingesting food and then separating this food into chemical nutrients that our cells can use. Number three, we've got absorbing nutrients to absorb those nutrients. And then number four is eliminating indigestible remains. So it will contribute to homeostasis thanks to these four steps we see here. Digestion is going to take place within a tube that's called the digestive tract or your gastrointestinal tract. This digestive tract or this GI tract, it's going to begin with the mouth, we see here, and it's going to end after we pass all of these various organs. It's going to end, you can see here, with the anus. So again, this digestive tract will begin with the mouth and it ends with the anus. Digestion is going to involve what's known as mechanical digestion and what's known as chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion begins with the chewing of food in the mouth, and it's going to continue to the stomach, where then we're going to see mixing and churning. Churning, churning, churning of this food is going to occur. Churning is a powerful pulverization of the food thanks to the muscles of the stomach. The stomach, we're going to see, is going to have a third layer of muscle to it. It's the oblique layer, and that's going to help to powerfully pulverize this food. Now, during chemical digestion, various enzymes will come into play, and they're going to break down macromolecules, big molecules, right, into smaller molecules that can be absorbed. Right? This is talking about starchy foods, proteins, right, lipids, all being broken down to their constituent building blocks. Starch being broken down to glucose, proteins being broken down to amino acids, and then lipids being broken down to glycerol and then the three fatty acids, all to be absorbed. Right? The hot dog that we ate for lunch or the pizza we ate is not what's going to be floating around in our bloodstream. It's smaller molecules, they will be. So again, when we talk mechanical digestion, it begins in the mouth with chewing, and it's going to continue in the stomach with churning and the mixing of food. And then we have chemical digestion. In chemical digestion, enzymes come into play, and they're going to help break down our macromolecules into smaller molecules that can then be absorbed. So let's talk first about the mouth. Let's start with the mouth. Now, when we talk mechanical digestion, we'll see that mechanical digestion is going to begin in the mouth, and it's going to continue in the stomach, we said. We talk chemical digestion is going to begin in the mouth, and it's going to continue in the stomach, where then different chemicals will act, and then in the small intestine, we'll see other chemicals will act. So we'll go through and look at all of this interesting stuff. Let's start then with the mouth, and let's look at all the different events that are going to take place in relation to the mouth. Now, when we talk about the mouth, I would like you to know that the mouth is going to be responsible for ingesting food. It's going to be, number one, responsible for ingesting food. The mouth has borders, and we'll see the border anteriorly is going to be the lips, and then the cheeks we have laterally, the tongue we have inferiorly, and then the hard palate and the soft palate we have superiorly. So let's talk first about the mouth. Let's go right out here in this picture, and here we can appreciate the red portion of our lips. We'll see the red portion of our lips is going to be poorly keratinized. It's poorly keratinized, and this allows the blood vessels to show through the skin, and that's why we have a different color there. Next, then, when we talk about the mouth, I'd like you to know that the mouth is going to contain sensory receptors that are going to be called taste buds. These taste buds are going to be activated by the presence of food. They will then generate nerve impulses, and these nerve impulses are going to travel via cranial nerves to the brain to allow us to interpret then what we are tasting. Next, then, we have our tongue. When we talk about the tongue is going to be composed of many skeletal muscles, and the tongue is going to contain the majority of these taste buds. However, these taste buds, they're not limited to just the tongue. They're going to be found scattered throughout the entire oral cavity. Next, when we talk about the roof of the mouth, the roof of the mouth is going to separate the nasal cavity from the oral cavity, from the mouth. The roof of the mouth is going to prevent food from entering the nasal cavity. The roof has two parts to it. It's going to have a hard palate, which is the more anterior portion, and it's going to have a soft palate, which forms the more posterior portion of the palate. We'll see the hard palate is made up of bones, and then the soft palate is going to be made up of muscles. The hard palate, again made up of bones, you should know the maxilla and the palatine bone. And the soft palate, muscle. The soft palate, muscle, and we can add connective tissue. The soft palate ends as the uvula. The uvula is going to be a finger-shaped or a pendulous structure, you can say. It's going to be found projecting at the back of the mouth. It's found projecting at the back of the mouth. We also have our tonsils here. Our tonsils, they're going to help protect the body from infections. The soft palate ends as the uvula, which is going to be a finger-shaped projection. It's found at the back of the mouth. Now, when we talk newborns, I'd like you to know newborns, they can be born with cleft palate. This is again where the bones of the hard palate have not fused, leaving a gap. And this has to be surgically repaired, or it results in problems feeding, results in problems in relation to speech, also in relation to hearing due to ear infections. Next, we have here our tonsils. The tonsils are found in the back of the mouth. They're found on either side of the tongue and at the entrance of the nasopharynx. We also have 3 pairs of salivary glands, and they're going to be responsible for producing saliva. Saliva is going to keep the mouth moist, and it's going to contain an enzyme that's going to begin the process of digesting starchy foods, again in the mouth. 1 pair of glands is going to be found lying on either side of the face, immediately below and in front of the ears. And these glands are going to be found located approximately in this area, and they're going to be known as your parotid glands. Your parotid glands. These glands, they can swell, and they swell when a patient has mumps. Mumps is going to be a disease that's caused by a viral infection. Another pair of salivary glands are going to be found lying beneath the tongue, and they're going to be called the sublingual glands. And then we have another pair that's going to be found beneath the floor of the mouth. And this pair will be called the submandibular glands. The submandibular glands. So we have submandibular, sublingual, and our parotid salivary glands. And next then, let's move back and let's actually check out those glands. So here you can appreciate we've got our salivary glands. Here we've got one, obviously on the other side of the body, you're going to have the same thing, so that's how they'll be found as a pair. So here we can see the parotid glands. And then here we can appreciate our sublingual and submandibular glands. All right, let's move then to the teeth. Let's talk about the teeth. Our teeth are going to help to chew our food. They help us to chew our food. They help to chew our food into pieces that are going to be small enough for swallowing. During the first 2 years of life, our smaller 20 deciduous, or we can say our baby teeth, are going to appear. They are going to be replaced eventually by our 32 adult teeth. They will be replaced by our 32 adult teeth. We can see each tooth is going to have two main divisions to them. They will have a crown and they will have a root to them. The crown we can see is going to be the outer layer of enamel, basically right outside of here. The second division is going to be the root. So we've got the crown and then we have the root. Now when we talk about the crown, I want you to know the crown is going to be, we said, basically a layer of enamel. And this enamel is going to be an extremely hard covering that's made of calcium. And then beneath that, we can appreciate dentin. Dentin is going to be a layer of thick bone-like material. It's a layer of thick bone-like material. And then inside of here, we can appreciate the pulp. The pulp is going to be the space that contains nerves and vessels. Dentin and pulp are also found in the root. You can appreciate right down in here. Here the dentin makes its way down and then around, all the way around. And then right in here you can see this is all the root, and then down in here is the root canals. So again, dentin and pulp are going to be found in the root. The gum tissue, our gum tissue, is also called our gingiva, the gingiva. The gingiva, you can see it surrounds the tooth and it forms a tight seal around the tooth. Bacteria is going to be responsible for causing dental caries or dental cavities, I'd like you to know about. Next, then we have gingivitis. Gingivitis is going to be an inflammation of the gums, of the gingiva. And it can spread to the tooth socket lining that's called the periodontal membrane. And then it can lead to what we call periodontitis, which can then lead to the loss of bone or tooth loss. All right, next in here we can appreciate our upper row of teeth and our lower row of teeth. So here we're going to see, we'll look at basically this half first, and you have the same thing being applied to this half. And then we're going to see the same exact concept that we have applied down here is going to be applied to the upper row of teeth as well. So right back here we have our 3 molars. So you can say we have 6 molars in total, 3 here on this side and 3 back here. And then next we have our 2 premolars, and same thing you're going to have here on the side, 2 premolars. And then in front of those you have your canines, so 1 canine on each side, here 1 canine, and then on this side we have our other canine. And then we can appreciate our 2 incisors, and then on the other side the 2 incisors. So you have a total of 4 incisors on the lower row, 2 canines on the lower row, right? You just double these numbers, 4 premolars on this lower row, and then 6 molars. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on this half, 8 teeth on this other half, total of 16 teeth, and then same exact thing on the top. All right, next in here we can see we talked about dental caries. I want you to know exactly here the process that it takes to actually develop the dental carie, the cavity. So you can see here bacteria that are going to adhere to the teeth are going to actually metabolize sugar, which is going to release acids, which then erode the enamel. So the acids are going to erode the enamel. Dental caries and cavities, they result from the eroded enamel, which is a slow process. And then I want you to know once the dentin layer is reached, the damage is going to spread more rapidly. And we talked gingivitis, and we mentioned periodontitis. All right, next then let's move to the pharynx. Now we talk about the pharynx, I'd like you to know the pharynx is going to be a region that receives air from the nasal cavities and food from the mouth. From the mouth, the food bolus is going to pass through the pharynx and onto the esophagus. And we saw from the esophagus, it's going to move forward then to the stomach. So here we'll look at all of that process then in greater detail. From the stomach, food then is going to make its way down into the small intestine and then into the large intestine. So right in here we can appreciate that. So we said from the mouth, the food bolus is going to pass into the pharynx. We saw that in greater detail when we were looking at respiratory. So right back in here. And then from the pharynx, we said it's going to make its way down into the esophagus. Right? You can see the larynx has been removed and the trachea have been removed. They would be right here in the front. And then here, so food is going to make its way down into the esophagus. From the esophagus, it makes its way down into the stomach. From the stomach, then we said into the small intestine. And then from the small intestine up into the large intestine. From the large intestine, then you can see into the anus and then out. So here, I want you to know that food and air cross in the pharynx. They cross in the pharynx because the trachea is ventral and the esophagus is dorsal, which we said takes food to the stomach. Now, I want you to know swallowing is going to be a process that occurs in the pharynx, and it's a reflex action that's performed automatically. It's going to be performed automatically without conscious thought. During swallowing, the soft palate is going to move back. It moves back and up a little bit to close off the nasopharynx. And then at the same time, we'll see the larynx and the trachea, they move up. They move up against the epiglottis, and they cause the epiglottis to cover the entrance into the glottis. During swallowing, we'll see food is going to enter into the esophagus because those air passageways are going to be totally blocked. They will be completely blocked. I'd like you to know also, when we swallow, we do not breathe. So we do not breathe when we're swallowing. If we do happen to talk or breathe while we are swallowing, food will go into the wrong pathway. It can enter either the nasal cavities or into the trachea. If it enters into the trachea, we have seen and we talked about before as well, this is going to trigger the coughing reflex. And then the coughing reflex is going to help to remove the irritant from that respiratory passageway. So here we can see the food bolus enters into the pharynx. And when it enters into the pharynx, here you can see the soft palate rises to block off that entrance into the nasopharynx. And then right down in here, the larynx and the trachea, they rise. And you can see that epiglottis is helping to shut off that pathway into the respiratory tract. So that way food has only one way to go, and that's going to be down into the esophagus. Next, then let's talk about the esophagus. When we talk about the esophagus is going to be a long muscular tube that's going to pass from the pharynx through the thoracic cavity and the diaphragm and into the abdominal cavity where it joins the stomach. So it makes its way all the way down into the abdominal cavity where it's going to join the stomach. The esophagus we'll see is ordinarily collapsed, but during swallowing, it will start to expand. So if we were to draw that out, here we would be able to see just that. So here we can say is going to be the trachea. Obviously, I'm drawing it much bigger in size. And then here we have the trachealis muscle that's going to be found between the trachea. So I'll just put a T in here for the center, at the center of the trachea. Okay, and then down here, we're going to see we'll have the esophagus. So here we can see, basically, when it's not involved in helping to move food along, it's collapsed like we can see here in this picture. But when it's actually helping to move food along, you'll see here what's going to happen is this center is going to open up even more. So now that center is going to be widened out a bit. It will look something more like this. So it's not considered collapsed anymore. Next then, let's move down. Next time we move down, I'd like you guys to know the esophagus is going to have rhythmic muscular contractions take place within it. These rhythmic muscular contractions are going to be called peristaltic waves. These peristaltic waves are going to push food along this digestive tract and help it to keep moving forward. So when we talk peristalsis, peristalsis is going to be an alternating contraction and relaxation of the local muscle. Again, these are movements that are going to help to move food forward along the digestive tract. The sole purpose of the esophagus is to conduct food from the mouth into the stomach. That's really all it does. It passes food from the mouth to the stomach. There's no absorption that happens inside the esophagus. There's no mechanical breakdown, no chemical breakdown, nothing really important that's happening inside of there. All right, next, I'd like you to know, as this food makes its way down and it passes into the esophagus and then eventually out of the esophagus, its passage into and out of the esophagus is going to be controlled by sphincters. These sphincters are going to be muscles that act as valves, and they're going to allow food to enter into the esophagus. So we're going to have one at the entrance of the esophagus, which is going to be known as the upper esophageal sphincter. And then we're going to have one at the exit of the esophagus, right at the entrance of the stomach, and that's going to be called the lower esophageal valve or the gastroesophageal valve. So two sphincters there that I want you to know about. I'd like you to know that the esophagus is going to be a closed structure when the sphincters contract. And it's going to be an open structure when the sphincters relax. Relaxation of the sphincter is going to allow food to make its way into the esophagus, and then we'll see relaxation of the sphincter that's found between the esophagus and the stomach. When it relaxes, it's going to allow food to make its way then into the stomach. If the contents of the stomach escape into the esophagus, this can cause heartburn. So again, this can cause heartburn. Heartburn is going to be a feeling that's a burning type of a feeling. It's going to be rising up to the throat. And this is going to occur when some of the stomach contents escapes into the esophagus. Now, a serious form of GERD can eventually lead to ulcers and even cancer from chronic irritation. All right, next in here, let's talk about the wall of the digestive tract. I'd like you to know the structure of the walls of the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine are all going to be composed of 4 layers. They're all going to be composed of 4 layers. So you can say you have 4 layers of the digestive tract. First, we're going to have the mucosa. And then second, we're going to have the submucosa. And third, we can see we'll have the muscularis. And then fourth will be the serosa. So first, let's talk about the mucosa. Now, when we talk about the mucosa is also known as the mucous membrane layer. The mucosa membrane layer, the mucosa, it's going to be a layer of epithelium that's going to be supported by connective tissue. So it's epithelium that's supported by connective tissue. Here we can also see we're going to have a layer of smooth muscle that's going to line the lumen, the central cavity. There's going to be glandular epithelial cells that are going to secrete enzymes, and goblet cells that are going to secrete mucus. Next then we have the submucosa, or the submucosal layer, and it's going to be found beneath the mucosa. This submucosa is going to be a broad band of loose connective tissue that's going to contain blood vessels. It will contain blood vessels. Also found here are going to be Peyer's patches, P-E-Y-E-R-S. They're missing an R here, P-E-Y-E-R-S, Peyer's patches. They're going to be lymph nodules, and they're going to help protect us from disease. They will help protect us from disease. And then number 3, we've got the muscularis, or the muscular layer. Now, when we talk about this muscularis, or the muscular layer, it's going to be basically 2 layers of smooth muscle. Usually we'll see the inner layer will be the circular layer, And this circular layer is going to encircle the gut. And then you have the outer layer. The outer layer is the longitudinal layer, and you can see it's going to run perpendicular to the circular layer. It will run perpendicular to the circular layer. Now, when we talk about the stomach, we'll see we said an extra layer. We're going to have the oblique layer. We'll talk about that when we get there. Next, then we've got the serosa. So number 4, we've got the serosa, the serous membrane. Now, the serous membrane layer, the serosa layer, is going to be the outermost layer, and it's going to be the outermost layer of squamous epithelium. It's going to be the outermost layer of squamous epithelium. And this layer, we can see it secretes serous fluid to help moisten the surface. And it's going to allow organs to slide against one another. So here we can appreciate that then, right inside of here. Starting with the outermost layer, we've got the serosal layer. And then moving in, we've got the muscular layer, the 2 layers of smooth muscle. So here you can see you've got the longitudinal layer first. And then we've got the circular layer. You can see it's running the circumference of the lumen. And then in terms of that, we've got the submucosa. And then the most internal layer we can appreciate here is going to be the mucosa. So the mucosa right inside of here. All inside of here. All mucosa. Coming around. So mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, and then serosa. Next in here, let's check this out under the microscope. So under the microscope, we can see the serosa right here on the outside. And then we've got the muscularis layers right inside of here. And then here you've got the submucosa. And then here we've got the mucosa. So mucosa, mucosa, all the way around. Nice image of mucosa, all the way around. So mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, the 2 layers, and then serosa on the outside. All right, next then let's move to the stomach. Let's talk about the stomach. The stomach is going to be a thick-walled, J-shaped organ that's going to be found lying on the left side of the abdominal cavity next to the liver and below the diaphragm. The stomach is going to be continuous with the esophagus on its superior aspect, and then we can see on the inferior aspect it's going to be continuous with the duodenum of the small intestine. The stomach is going to receive food from the esophagus. The stomach is going to begin the digestion of proteins. Now in the mouth, we saw starch digestion that's going to begin, and that's going to begin thanks to the enzyme salivary amylase. Salivary amylase is the enzyme that's going to be found helping to break down starchy foods inside the mouth. In the stomach, we can see is where we're going to begin protein digestion. And here you can see we will also eventually move food into the small intestine. The stomach, you can see, is able to expand to hold about 4 liters when it's completely full. And the stomach is going to have rugae, or longitudinal folds, that allow for the expansion. Now, when we talk about the stomach lining, we can see this internal lining, this epithelial layer we talked about inside of here, the mucosa, is going to be columnar epithelium. So columnar epithelium is going to be lining the stomach, and it's going to have millions of gastric pits. These gastric pits, they're going to lead to gastric glands. They will lead us to gastric glands. And the gastric glands are going to be important because the gastric glands are going to be responsible for producing gastric juice. Gastric juice is going to contain various components inside of it. Gastric juice, we'll see, is going to be very acidic. Gastric juice is going to contain pepsinogen that's going to become pepsin when it comes into contact with acid, and that's going to be able to break down proteins. We're also going to see inside of here hydrochloric acid, which is going to contribute to the acidity, and mucus. The high acidity of the stomach, we'll see it has a pH that ranges around 2, is also going to be beneficial because it's going to help kill most of the bacteria and other microbes that may enter our gastrointestinal tract via our food. So here, let's look at this in greater detail. So here we can see we've got our pits, and these pits are going to lead us into our glands. These are all the glands here. All right, so here we can see the stomach is going to break down food both mechanically and chemically. Again, it's going to have 3 layers of muscles. So the circular layer, the longitudinal layer that we've seen, and then the third layer is going to be the oblique layer I want you to know about. These muscles, they're going to help move food along the tract. They're going to help churn our food, and they're going to help mix this food with gastric juice and break it down into small pieces. And then when we talk absorption, you'll see most food is not going to be absorbed by the stomach. However, when we talk alcohol and other liquids, they are absorbed in the stomach. They are absorbed in the stomach. All right, next, I would like you to know that the stomach is going to normally empty in 2 to 6 hours. That depends on what you have eaten. Now, when food leaves the stomach, food is going to leave the stomach as a thick, soupy liquid that's called chyme. So we call it chyme. That's food that's leaving the stomach. Chyme is going to enter the small intestine after having passed through the pyloric sphincter. The pyloric sphincter is going to act as a valve, and it's going to be found in between the stomach and the small intestine. It's going to act as a valve, and it's going to continually open and close, permitting food to pass, again, from the stomach into the small intestine. So then, to sum up the stomach, you can see the stomach's function is going to be to produce gastric juice, and this gastric juice is going to contain hydrochloric acid, pepsinogen, along with that a whole bunch of other stuff. These are the main components I'd like you to know about. And then you can see there, they'll start breaking down proteins. The acid, as you have learned also, the acid is going to break down proteins too. The acid is going to break down certain proteins. Proteins that denature in this acid environment will be broken down. So we've got basically 2 mechanisms, both acting mostly on proteins. In the mouth, we saw starch being acted on. Okay, then this enzyme that was acting on the starchy foods, when it reaches the stomach, it's a protein, it becomes deactivated because this pH inside the stomach is not an optimal pH for this enzyme. Okay, so now food is going to move from the stomach, we said, thanks to this valve opening up and allowing the food to move then into the small intestine. So with the valve, the pyloric sphincter opening up, this will allow now food to pass into the small intestine. Let's talk then small intestine. Now, when we talk about the small intestine, I'd like you to know that the small intestine has a small diameter compared to the large intestine. This small intestine is very long. It's very long. It's about 20 feet in length, about 6 meters long. The first 1 foot of this small intestine, the first 1 foot or the first 25 centimeters is called the duodenum. The duodenum. Ducts from the liver and the pancreas are going to join to form one common bile duct that's going to enter into the duodenum. The small intestine, it receives bile from the liver, and it receives pancreatic juice from the pancreas. So here we can check that out by jumping a few slides forward. Here you can see that very well right inside of here and right in there. So here you can see, we can see the common bile duct making its way down, and then it receives this main pancreatic duct, which both then empty, you can see their contents right into that duodenum. So moving back then, we've got our duodenum. Here you can see it receives pancreatic juice from the pancreas and then bile from the liver. Now bile, we'll see its function is to emulsify fat. It's responsible for emulsifying fat. What does emulsifying fat means? It's involved in, we can say, in the process of emulsification. What does this all mean? This bile is involved in breaking down fat from being one big glob of fat to being smaller fat droplets. So it's like this. Let's say we have one big glob of fat. This process of emulsification, this bile, what it does, it breaks down this big fat globule into smaller fat droplets. Now, why does it break it down into smaller fat droplets? Because what this does is it helps to increase the surface area of that fat. Now, when enzymes are going to come into play and they're going to act on this fat, it's going to be easier for that enzyme to completely digest this fat now as in the form of smaller droplets compared to this big fat drop that we had up here. So that's what emulsification does. That's what bile does. So patients who have had their gallbladder removed, because we'll talk about that in a few minutes, they don't have the storage of bile anymore. Bile is produced by the liver. It gets stored in the gallbladder. So when the gallbladder gets removed now, their quantity of bile is decreased. So we tell these patients to decrease the quantity of fats that they consume, because now the quantity of bile that they have compared to somebody who has a gallbladder is going to be decreased. Next time we talk pancreatic juice. Pancreatic juice is going to contain many enzymes. These enzymes that it contains, all these enzymes, they're like biological scissors, I like to describe them. They're going to come in and chop everything and anything up. That's why pancreatic cancer is a very serious cancer, because pancreas not only is producing enzymes that break down all categories of foodstuff, and remember, you are what you eat. Doesn't mean I ate shrimp for lunch, I'm a shrimp. No, it means I ate carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and that's exactly what's building me up. Carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, right? That's what our cells are made up of, and that's eventually what we are made up of. So it has the ability to start breaking down that pancreas, and the pancreas is responsible for regulating also our glucose and our insulin. So when we talk the endocrine function, you saw with endocrine system. Now we talk exocrine function, that's what we're looking at here in relation to the digestive tract. So the pancreas is going to produce and release many enzymes for digestion of nutrients. Also bicarbonate to neutralize the acidic pH of chyme. Now, the stomach, we'll see, is made, it's adapted to have that acidic chyme inside of it. However, the duodenum is not designed to withstand these harsh environments. So that chyme that's coming in is very acidic, but the duodenum can't deal with that acidity. So how does it deal with that acidity? It has bicarbonate come in from our pancreatic juice, which will help to neutralize that acidic pH. I mean, see how well designed we are? Beautiful, beautiful. So next then here we can see, when we talk the small intestine, it has a slightly higher pH because of pancreatic juice, and that pancreatic juice containing sodium bicarbonate, which again we can see is going to help neutralize the acid inside the chyme. Now the enzymes in pancreatic juice and the enzymes produced by the intestinal wall are going to help complete food digestion. Again, the enzymes in pancreatic juice and the enzymes produced by the intestinal wall are going to complete food digestion. The next part, or we can say the middle part of the small intestine, is called the jejunum. The jejunum is going to lead us to the final part, which is the ileum. Now, when we talk jejunum and ileum, they're both going to be responsible for absorption. A lot of absorption is going to take place in these two regions. The jejunum, again, is the middle section. The ileum, now we can see, is going to lead us to the large intestine. So it leads us to the large intestine. Now, between the ileum, so between the last portion of the small intestine and the large intestine, we're also going to have another valve there. And that's going to be called the ileocecal valve. The ileocecal valve is going to be the valve between the small intestine and the large intestine. So you can see this whole digestive tract is regulating the passage of food stuff very well, very well. And then here in relation to the ileum, we're going to be able to appreciate here Peyer's patches, especially towards the end, the terminal ileum we refer to it as. There's lots of Peyer's patches there. And again, they're going to be involved with the immune response to intestinal pathogens. Because now once whatever leaves this small intestine is going to be basically undigestible remains and lots of bacteria and water. Then the large intestine is going to be responsible for absorbing this water and then producing a few vitamins we'll see and helping to produce feces and then removing this feces out from the body. So I want you to know that the submucosa of the ileum is going to contain lymphoid tissue called Peyer's patches. The wall of the small intestine is going to contain finger-like projections that are going to be called villi. These villi, they're going to help increase the surface area. So you can see the small intestine has a large surface area thanks to villi and microvilli. Villi are going to be finger-like projections. They contain, we'll see in the center, blood capillaries for nutrient absorption. When we talk about nutrient absorption, here in the villi, the blood capillaries are going to carry sugars and amino acids. When we talk about our lacteals are going to be basically lymph capillaries. They are a part of the lymphatic system, and what they do is they carry digested fats. They carry digested fats, and then remember we've seen they're going to eventually connect to the bloodstream. Now we talk microvilli. Microvilli are going to be microscopic extensions that are going to be found on the surface of epithelial cells of our villi. So you can see in here microvilli. They're microscopic villi that are going to be found in relation to our villi. Our microvilli are also going to help increase our surface area for the absorption of nutrients. So here we can see we've got a segment of small intestine. If we were to open that segment up, you can appreciate inside of here the lumen. And now here we look at all the different layers. You can appreciate first here the mucosa. And here we can appreciate many villi. All these villi all along here. So for to move pictures, here we can appreciate those villi then in greater detail. Here you can see those villi. And then here at the center you've got the lacteal. And here we've got the blood capillaries, all involved with absorption. And then here again you can see all those villi, and then right on top of those villi we've got microvilli. So here you can appreciate, again, many villi, all these villi. So we'll zoom in on one of them, and this is what we're looking at. And now here on this villi is where we can appreciate then the microvilli. So here's the villi. We're going to be able to appreciate all of the microvilli. So again, all helping to increase that surface area inside the small intestine. All right, next then let's look at the regulation of digestive secretions. Digestive secretions are going to be regulated by the nervous system and by hormones. Again, hormones are going to be substances that are produced by a group of cells that travel through the bloodstream to faraway organs, and they affect a different group of cells, their target cells. Hormones are going to be released into the blood for transport, as we mentioned. Now, the first hormone that I would like you to know about is gastrin. Gastrin is going to be released by the stomach after a protein-rich meal. Gastrin increases gastric motility and the secretions by gastric glands. So it's going to cause the stomach to churn more, and our gastric glands, their activity is going to be increased. Next, we have GIP, gastric inhibitory peptide. It's going to be produced by the duodenal walls. And what it does is it inhibits gastric gland secretions, kind of like applying the brakes, telling the stomach to hold on and not pump all this food into the small intestine. So you can see they work together. Next two hormones that I would like you to know about are going to be secretin and CCK. Secretin and CCK are going to regulate digestion. Secretin is going to be produced by our duodenal walls, and its release is stimulated by the entrance of hydrochloric acid in chyme. Next then is CCK, cholecystokinin. It's also produced by the duodenal walls, and its release is stimulated by proteins and by fat that's going to be found in chyme. Now together, secretin and CCK are going to act on three organs. They're going to act on three organs, and they're going to cause, you can see the pancreas, to increase pancreatic juice output. Number two, they'll act on the liver, and they'll cause the liver to increase bile output. And then number three, they'll act on the gallbladder. They'll cause the gallbladder to contract to release bile. So here we can check all that out. Here you can see we've got secretin and CCK together stimulating the action then of these three organs. Gallbladder, the liver, and then we've got the pancreas here. So here we can see how the two hormones are acting on those three organs. Same thing we're seeing here. Next, then let's talk about the large intestine. Now, when we talk about the large intestine is going to include the cecum, it'll include the colon, it'll include the rectum, and it'll include the anal canal. The large intestine, it's larger in diameter compared to the small intestine. However, it's shorter in length. Now, when we talk about the functions of the large intestine, you'll see the large intestine absorbs water, it absorbs salts, and some vitamins. It also stores indigestible remains until they can be removed from the body as feces. The cecum is going to be found lying below the junction with the small intestine. It's just a small pouch, we'll see, that's going to form the first part of the large intestine. The cecum is going to have a small projection that's called the appendix. This appendix, we're not too sure about its functions. However, we believe it's involved with helping to fight against infection. Now, when it becomes inflamed, we have a condition the patient suffers from, and this will be called appendicitis. And now new research is saying surgery or surgical intervention is not necessarily always required. Antibiotics should help the patient out. So antibiotics and sometimes surgery may be required there for the patient. Now, if this appendix happens to burst, this can lead to peritonitis. Peritonitis is going to be an inflammation of the lining of the abdominal cavity, and it is very serious and can lead to death. So let's look at all of that. You can see here's about the cecum. So here we can actually see the cecum. So right in here you've got the small intestine. And right in here is where we can see the small intestine opens into the large intestine. So right in here is where we're going to be able to appreciate that ileocecal valve we talked about. So right in here then, you can see where the two meet at is right in here. And then beneath that is where we describe this cecum to be at. So the cecum, the pouch, is right in here. And now shooting off of that cecum is the vermiform appendix. And now if this appendix gets obstructed, right? It gets obstructed by fecal lift usually, and this can lead to then its inflammation. So this next segment we have here then, the next division you can say of the large intestine is going to be the ascending colon. So we have the colon here. The colon gets divided up into an ascending portion, and then we're going to have a transverse portion, and then a descending portion, and then a sigmoid colon, which will lead us to the rectum. So here we can appreciate then all the divisions of the large intestine. So first we've got the appendix, the cecum, and then next we have the colon. So the colon, we have first the ascending colon. It's running up, you can see the right side of the abdominal cavity, and then the transverse colon running across the abdominal cavity over to the left side from the right side. And then here you've got the descending colon, which runs down the left side, which will then lead us to the sigmoid colon. We can appreciate right inside of here, which will then take us to the next part of the large intestine, which will be the rectum. And then finally the anus, where defecation and the expulsion of feces will occur. So moving back, we've got our large intestine then taken care of there fully. So the rectum, you can see it's only about 20 centimeters of the large intestine, nothing big. And it's going to open into the anus, and then the anus is where we said defecation occurs. And defecation, we can see, is going to be reflex triggered. It's reflex triggered as feces are going to be forced into the rectum. Next, when we talk feces, feces are typically 3/4 water and 1/4 solids. And we talk about the components of feces. You can see feces will be made up of bacteria, plant fiber, and indigestible materials that are found in the solid portion. Bacterial breakdown, we can see, of indigestible materials is going to account for the odor, also for the presence of gas. Metabolism of bilirubin and oxidized iron, it's going to account for the brown color. It'll account for the brown color. So here we can appreciate then the various organs that food is going to pass through to make its way all the way to the end. And then here's their general functions and their special features. And then last, you can see the function of the special features. Next, let's move to our accessory organs of digestion. Now, when we talk about our accessory organs of digestion, you'll see this will include our pancreas, our liver, our gallbladder, and our salivary glands. They're all different types of accessory organs. First, let's talk about the pancreas. Now, when we talk about the pancreas we'll see is going to be found lying deep in the abdominal cavity, as we've mentioned before. It's elongated and somewhat flat when you talk about its appearance. Now, when we talk about its functions, you can see it's got both endocrine functions and exocrine functions. The endocrine functions we said are going to include to release insulin and glucagon, where then its main function is to regulate blood glucose. The exocrine functions are to release pancreatic juice. Pancreatic juice, we said, contains sodium bicarbonate, which is going to neutralize stomach acid. Pancreatic amylase now, which is one enzyme here that you need to know about, which will help digest starchy foods. Trypsin, which is going to help digest proteins. And then lipase, which is going to help digest fats, which will help digest fatty foods. Next, then let's talk about our liver. When we talk about our liver is going to be the largest gland found in the body. The liver is going to be found in the upper right section of the abdominal cavity, just underneath the diaphragm. The liver is going to contain thousands of lobules. When you look at it microscopically, it's going to contain thousands of lobules that are going to serve as the structural and the functional units of the liver. These lobules, they're going to contain three structures. The first structure I want you to know about here is going to be a bile duct. And this bile duct is going to be responsible for taking bile away from the liver. It takes bile away from the liver. Next, then we have a branch of the hepatic artery. When we talk about this branch of the hepatic artery, this vessel is going to bring oxygen-rich blood to the liver. It will bring oxygen-rich blood to the liver. And then third, we're going to see we have a branch of the hepatic portal vein. A branch of the hepatic portal vein. This vessel is going to transport nutrient-rich blood from the intestines to the liver. It transports nutrient-rich blood from the intestines to the liver because the liver is going to act as a gatekeeper. It's going to inspect all of this precious cargo that's going to be coming to it via the bloodstream. Next, I'd like you to know each lobule is going to have a central vein to it as well. And that central vein is going to enter the hepatic vein, which is going to eventually lead to the inferior vena cava. So here, let's trace this pathway of blood from the intestines then to the inferior vena cava. So right in here, we can appreciate that. Here we can see we've got our intestines, and this is where we said our absorption is going to occur. So as soon as the absorption occurs, it's going to pass into these vessels, and then from these vessels, you can see it's going to make its way into the hepatic portal vein. This hepatic portal vein is going to route that nutrient-rich blood right to the gatekeeper, right to the liver. So the liver then inspects all of this precious cargo, and then here you can see the hepatic veins are going to be responsible for routing that blood out. And they'll route that blood out into, we said, the inferior vena cava. So let's look at this liver then under the microscope. Now when we throw that liver under the microscope, this is what we're seeing. Here's, we can appreciate one of the lobules. So here you can see the lobules are constructed of all these hepatocytes. They're laid down like bricks are to help form the structure of the liver. And now here you can see the triad. You've got the branch of the bile duct, you got a branch of the hepatic portal vein, and you got a branch of the hepatic artery. And then right here at the center, you've got that central vein. So nutrient-rich arterial blood is going to be coming in this way to serve the hepatocytes. Okay, and then we talk nutrient-rich blood coming from the intestines. It's also going to be coming up this way, making its way up towards the central vein. And now bile. Bile is going to be moving in the opposite direction of these other two. Bile is going to be moving in this direction. It moves into this bile duct. So that way then it could be removed out of the liver and make its way over to the duodenum. Pretty fascinating structure. So the liver, I want you to know again, acts as a gatekeeper to our blood. It's going to act as a gatekeeper to that nutrient-rich blood. So as blood from the hepatic portal vein passes through the liver, it's going to get processed at the liver. The liver is going to say, all right, fats, I want you to go this way. Glucose, I want you to go that way. Amino acids, I need you to go that way. So it's going to act as a gatekeeper there. It's going to make sure everything gets processed the way it's supposed to. So when we talk about the functions of the liver, you can see here, we said it's going to act as a gatekeeper. So it detoxifies and removes poisonous substances. It removes and stores iron and vitamin A, D, E, K, and B12. It makes plasma proteins. It regulates cholesterol. It regulates our blood glucose levels. It stores glucose, as we've talked about in the beginning of the semester, as glycogen. It produces bile, which we see is made up of bilirubin and bile salts. Bilirubin is going to be a hemoglobin breakdown product, and our bile salts are going to be there to help emulsify our fats. When we talk bile, bile is going to have a yellowish green color to it, and bile again is going to contain bile salts and bilirubin. Next in here we can see we've got all the functions of the liver. Very important organ for you to know about. Very important organ. All right, next in here we can appreciate our gallbladder. When we talk about the gallbladder is going to be a pear-shaped muscular sac, and it's going to be found attached to the undersurface of our liver. The liver produces bile. However, the gallbladder is going to be responsible for storing excess bile. Now, when bile is going to be needed, bile is going to leave the gallbladder, and it's going to make its way over to the duodenum via the common bile duct that we talked about and we saw earlier. So here we can see the common hepatic duct. It's going to join the cystic duct. Together, they will become then the common bile duct. They become then the common bile duct. So here we can appreciate the common bile duct, bringing that bile all the way down into the duodenum. So next in here, we're going to be able to appreciate all the different enzymes that are going to make their way in through with that pancreatic juice along with that bile into the duodenum. So let's talk about these enzymes now. When we talk digestive enzymes, we've got these digestive enzymes that are proteins. They're going to speed up specific chemical reactions. They're going to be involved in the breakdown of biomolecules of major food components such as carbs, proteins, nucleic acids, and our fats. So here we can see we've got first salivary amylase that's going to begin the breakdown of starchy foods in the mouth as we have described. Salivary amylase will catalyze starch and water into maltose. Maltose then is going to get broken down in the small intestine to glucose for absorption. Our protein digestion is going to begin in the stomach with pepsin. Pepsinogen is going to get activated to pepsin by our low pH, by the acid. And it will catalyze the reaction of proteins and water to form peptides. And then peptides, you can see, are going to get broken down in the small intestine into amino acids so they can be then absorbed. And when we talk pancreatic juice has a basic pH to, we said, help neutralize that stomach chyme. You can see now the slightly basic small intestine is optimum for pancreatic enzymes, pancreatic amylase, which is going to digest starch, and trypsin, which is going to be produced by the pancreas as trypsinogen, and then it gets converted to trypsin, which then helps to digest proteins. And then next we have lipase. Lipase is going to be a third pancreatic enzyme I want you to know about. It's going to help digest fats. Fats are first going to be emulsified, we said, by bile salts. And then we're going to see fats, along with water, right? We talked about this reaction, are going to help form glycerol plus the 3 fatty acids. Glycerol and the 3 fatty acids then are going to be absorbed into the villi. These fats then are going to be rejoined and packaged as lipoproteins, which are then absorbed into lacteals, Next in here we can see the small intestine villi cells, we said, are also going to produce enzymes. And those enzymes include peptidases and maltase. Peptidases are going to help break down peptides to amino acids. And this is going to occur in the small intestine, and then they get absorbed into the villi. And then maltase, along with water, we can see again, right, is going to help form 2 glucose molecules, as we mentioned in the beginning of the semester. Each disaccharide that's digested in the small intestine is going to have its own enzyme. And then if we have a lack of any one of these enzymes, it can cause illness. For example, lactose intolerance. We have no lactose. So no lactose, no enzyme. We can't break down lactose. Next in here, we can check out this nice table of our major digestive enzymes. So here you can see it also includes nuclease, nucleosidases, and then lipase here as well. So I want you to make sure you understand every single one of these enzymes that we've got listed here. Very important in digestion. So let's actually see digestion occur in relation to our carbohydrates first. We can see we've got our carbohydrate. The carbohydrate is in the lumen of the digestive tract. It gets acted on by pancreatic amylase, which will break it down into maltase, which gets further broken down into glucose, which then is what gets absorbed and makes its way into our blood capillary. So here we can see proteins. Proteins are going to get acted on by trypsin, which breaks them down to peptides, which then gets acted on by peptidase. Peptidase then helps to liberate all those amino acids, which then get absorbed and are floating around in our blood capillaries. And then last, we can appreciate fat digestion. You can see here how our bile salts and fat globules are going to come together to undergo emulsification, eventually then being acted on by lipase, which will then help form these chylomicrons, which then are going to be found in our bloodstream. All right, so last in here we can see, when we talk about our enzymes, I want you to know they're going to function best at an optimum temperature and at an optimum pH, as I've been describing. Optimum conditions are going to help to maintain the proper shape to fit the substrate. Now we can see an experiment can support the hypothesis that the digestion of egg whites, the protein part, is going to require the correct enzyme, which is going to be pepsin, and the acidic conditions for the reaction to take place. So here we can see how these enzymes work, and they liberate their final products, maltose to eventually 2 glucoses, and then pepsin to help form peptides, which will then be acted on by peptidases, which liberate then amino acids. Same thing here with our fats. A very interesting chapter.